Welcome to the Crazy Dre Podcast Show, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. It's your main man, aka Crazy Crockett, aka Andre's Podcast, brought to you by somewhere in Michigan. Obviously, you like my Detroit Pistons hat. We're not doing so well. Maybe Kate Cunningham is. He's got like 9 assists, 19 points for the start of his season, doing one of the things that most players can't do. It's basically carrying the team. Today, folks, I'd like to thank Spotify, Apple Podcasts. I know there's a lot of people out there and everywhere down in Florida now that are listening to my podcast. I'd like to thank anyone that on YouTube. It's on YouTube now, so you can listen to it or watch it. So I got to talk about a couple of things in sports, a couple of things in different avenues of sports. Not just the Detroit Lions or the Pistons or the Red Wings or the Tigers. I think I want to start out with De'Vondre Campbell for the San Francisco 49ers and Joe Ebum of the Philadelphia 76ers. Basketball and football, two different sports. But let's be real. If you're a guy on any professional team, and you decide not to play, like De'Vondre Campbell for the San Francisco 49ers against the Rams over the weekend, that says a lot of things about you, and that says a lot of things about the rest of the team. That might say a lot more things about Shanahan, actually, because maybe he's just not the coach for that team. Maybe he just doesn't know how to keep that team together. Maybe there's something about him that the team is falling apart. I know that McCaffrey was hurt a little bit here and then there, so go. Didi Samuel not really in the picture a lot of times. Ayuk had an off-season feud about his contract. Everything seemed to be falling apart for the 49ers. But saying that as a fan and someone that loves sports, that's something that you don't want to do. You just don't want to be that guy or that team that quits when things don't go your way, and you're there to support the franchise. You're there to support the fans. You support yourself. And I know that I don't know about life in sports as a player, but I think this is something that's been said about today's sports. And there's a different avenue that I might talk about. Where I think that yesteryears with sports, players from the 80s and the 70s and the 90s, I gotta get a drink of water. But players from the 90s and the 60s and the 80s, and especially if you're a black athlete, your sport, the way that you get to fame and fortune and wealth was through sports. And I know I'm kind of reaching out a little bit about my theory about sports among black America, black men. And I think that what I'm trying to really say is that I think a lot of these black men are figuring out that they don't always want to play sports. They don't want to entertain people. Having their body physically and mentally prepared for every game is a lot of work, a lot of strength, a lot of discipline, and there's other ways to make money. And other ways to make money is like electrician, plumbing, computer science, AI, technology, and everything else that you can ever imagine of engineering school or engineering anything on the highways, expressways, internet, everywhere you can think of. And maybe this is what's happening to sports itself. These guys are probably figuring out that they don't want to play forever in a league that hypothetically, they know they may never win a Super Bowl or NBA Finals. And for Campbell, there must have been something that really bugged the crap out of him to know that there are a couple players on your team that were injured, that you were the next man up and you didn't want to play. And I think part of it is that the lifespan of a pro athlete in football is probably only 4 years. And some guys last 16 on the defensive, offensive line. But usually with the running backs, it's 4 years. Linebackers, you see a lot of these guys get concussion protocols that maybe only last for 5 or 6 years. Detroit has a injured linebacker. Speaking of ourselves, is Alex Elizondo, the Italian last name, and he's hurt, and he's in the IR, and I don't know if he'll be back full strength by the following year. But there's something said about these athletes who are not playing anymore, like it's a life and death situation. This isn't like the 70s where the NBA wasn't making any money, and these players were playing because that's all they knew how to do. And the same thing with the NFL. A lot of these guys were only playing in the NFL, playing football, because that's their way of getting to somewhat of a financial gain or financial money at the moment. Of course, there was a 30 on 30 years ago about players that go broke for multiple reasons, for child support, for debt, bad investments, and all that. But that was over 5, 7, 8 years ago. So I would assume that this generation of athletes are making better decisions, and now they're rethinking their life goal, their life expression or expectancy to maintain their wealth or maintain their happiness. And I know I'm getting a little political out here and there, so forth, but you got to realize, okay, for example, the Joel Embiid, 76ers, played for, I think he played for France or somebody in the Olympics. He played all year last year, made the playoffs. Didn't make the NBA Finals, lost, went to the Olympics. As soon as the NBA started, he was back on basketball protocol with no time off. And I think that maybe Joel Embiid figured out that I don't need to be doing this to entertain people every night and every day. And you know, people like Michael Jordan and Isaiah Thomas and Magic Johnson and Larry Bird, those guys would have said, what are you doing? What are you thinking? But in reality, the golden age of the NBA was the 80s and the 90s. And now it's becoming depleted. And even though the 2010s and that era of Steph Curry came in and LeBron James in the late 90s, they carried on the torch. But, I mean, saying that, everyone becomes a shooter, no one's playing defense, the NBA has got really, really weak. I think that a lot of times when you make, and I don't even think it's about the money, I think it's really about the idea that you're just playing a game, and you're playing a game against your best friends on the court every night or every 3 nights, and then you're exhausted. And maybe the NBA players have figured out that the referees and the commissioner of these leagues are figuring out how to make money just skimming off the points of the games or calling personal fouls on certain players, and and I mean, anything that you can think of. So a lot of these players probably figured out, look, if I'm gonna have 4 fouls on me by the third quarter, and I'm roughly averaging 18, 22 points a game, and the over/under on FanDuel, DraftKings, uh, Caesar Casino, MGM has at me averaging at 23 points that game, but I'm gonna be in foul situations or foul problems in the fourth quarter, and I'm only going to get 16 points. So the casinos will win on that parlay or that player not reaching that point spread, or that game spread too. So I mean, you don't see LeBron James playing right now either for personal reasons. I'm not going to speculate anything about the law or anything he was doing with entertainment industry or his wife and his kids, whatever. That's just not important. What's important is that LeBron James, Joel Embiid, they're not playing. And you got Jimmy Butler on another mediocre basketball team that is going to be traded to some other team. And I think, and I'm going to keep repeating this, these NBA players, especially these American players, are figuring out that they don't need to play every game. There's no N plus for them to keep playing these meaningless games. 82 games a year is based on creating revenue or entertainment for 6 months of the year for winter sports. That's why you have the NFL going on 17 weeks or 18 weeks, and they want to add more weeks in the NFL season. And this is why a lot of these these NFL players are questioning why is the NFL making us or talking about adding more weeks to the season? And that's a lot of it has to do with revenue, about making money. It's about players, not even about the players making money. It's about the ownership, the franchise, the NBA, the NFL, making millions and millions of dollars. And I feel, the irony of this is that the NHL had the same issue about 5-10 years ago with their commissioner. I'm not even sure if he's the same guy or not anymore. But the NHL, those players are not even making as much as the NFL or the NBA players, but there's a sense of a different respect for the game for the NHL players. There's kind of like the holy grail of the Stanley Cup that holds over the Lombardi Trophy or the NBA Finals Trophy. Even Major League Baseball is doing better than the NBA, and you kind of wonder if these players are figuring things out, especially these American players. Now, a lot of these European players, they seem to not to care right now at this moment. But I mean, if Giannis from Milwaukee and Joel Embiid from some part of Africa or South Africa, if they stop playing, or let's say the Joker or Jovic, they decided to go play back in Europe and not in the NBA, that would really crush the NBA. So you have to wonder if the players in America are figuring something out. Again, I think it has a lot to do with the under-over spread points of the casinos, the FanDuel, the referees from the 90s that in the back of their head that, everyone kind of knows that certain games, certain situations, players are going to make more points. Certain times, certain situations, the players are going to have a very bad game. And a good example of this in the NFL was the Buffalo Bills and Detroit Lions. Now, I'm going to say Josh Allen is a phenomenal player. He does throw a lot of interceptions. He does throw a lot of risky passes. And he did that in the first quarter, and it worked out for them. And then the second half, it didn't work out for them at all. But the Buffalo Bills won, but the game was 48-42. So right now the NFL looks hot. But a lot of these players might do a Barry Sanders and say, hey, I don't want to play for 9 years. I don't want to be your golden cow or your cash cow or something like that. And, as a fan, I would tell you, yes, I'm disappointed in the NBA. But I also understand that as a older person, playing sports and being a pro athlete is something that I can never do. But there's other things in my life that will fill in my boredom or my loneliness or will fill in my happiness. That's what I'm trying to get. Sports isn't everything for me as if it was when I was 15, 18 years old. And a lot of these players are no longer 18 and 15 years old. They're in their mid-20s, they're in the early 30s. And I'm not just talking about the NBA, the NFL, baseball, MLB, anything that you can think of. And I think a lot of these players are seeing the light, the end of the tunnel. And I'm not going to try to figure out how to fix it, because that's just another story. I just already spent about 17 minutes on this. So I gotta talk about the Detroit Lions and the Buffalo Bills. And I gotta tell you that if I look at these stats of Detroit, I mean, I'm just going to go through all these players that played. Josh Allen had 23-34, 362 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, and no sacks. Now, Detroit is very vulnerable on the defensive line. We lost McNeil. We don't have Aiden Hutchinson. We also lost Montgomery as our second beat of our running back. But on the other defensive guy, Carla Davis, the cornerback, broken jaw. I mean, Detroit's depleting in their players. Staying healthy in the NFL is very difficult. Finding players in the practice squad or bring them in from other teams is very difficult. But Josh Allen, I mean, what can you say? Another MVP stat. You go to Jared Goff, 38 for 59, 494 yards, five touchdowns, 0 interceptions. He did give up 3 sacks, but there were at least a couple of times where Jared Goff ran for the first down or ran just to get out of that pocket and make something happen and throw the ball to St. Brown or LaPorta or even Gibbs. But if you look at the running game, James Cook had 14 carries, 105 yards, 2 touchdowns. Josh Allen scored 2 touchdowns, 2 of them in the first quarter. I tell you, that's something that I don't know how you're going to stop Josh Allen. I mean, he can run, he can throw, he can run out of the pocket, he can get away from any type of pressure. His receivers are not, I mean, his receiving core, Shakir, even Johnson, the running back, can catch the ball in the backfield or even on the line. He is just a phenomenal player. I think he might be better than Patrick Mahomes. I don't know. I like to watch. I think maybe Josh Allen has a better core, the receiving, than Mahomes does. I know Mahomes got hurt against. I don't know who it was against because I'm not going to talk about that. But he did get hurt. Sore ankle for Mahomes, but you got Ray Davis, 7 carries, 15 yards. Ty Johnson, two carries, 9 yards, but that's not where Ty Johnson did all his damage. Ty Johnson caught, I think, at least 3 catches for over 20 yards. But he had 5. Ty Johnson had 5 receptions, 114 yards. The longest one was 33 yards. I mean, what can you say about that? Jamar Gibbs for Detroit had 8 carries, 31 yards, 1 touchdown. Jared Goff had two carries for 13 yards. David Montgomery, I kind of noticed that he had a sore ankle. He's got a torn MCL. That's what they say, but I noticed in the past weeks he looked a little limping, and he didn't play 2 weeks ago. I think against Atlanta or something. I don't know, but it was a couple games ago that he wasn't playing. We go to the receiving core for Detroit. St. Brown finally had a game. For a long time, St. Brown was, they weren't connecting with him. So St. Brown had 14 receptions, 193 yards. The longest one was 66 yards, 18 total targets. So that's really good. Sam Laporta, they found Sam Laporta, 7 receptions, 111 yards. 111 yards. 31 is the longest reception, 10 targets. Jaden Gibbs, 5 receptions, 83 yards, 1 touchdown, 21 yards, the longest. Jamison Williamson had a touchdown with 3 receptions, 37 yards. Montgomery had 4 receptions, 31 yards. Tim Patrick, he had a touchdown. He had 1 touchdown, 4 receptions for 30 yards. Dan Skipper, offensive line guy. They lined him up as a tight end, and he scored a touchdown. It was pretty cool. Dan Campbell seems to love going into his pocket of take a guess who's going to catch the football off the offensive line. Guy must have really soft hands for being a big guy to be throwing it to him. Allen Robinson had nothing going on, but St. Brown did have a fumble, and then so did Jared Goff had a fumble, but we recovered that football with Jared Goff. St. Brown fumble, we lost the possession. A lot of things, and then of course, unfortunately, Brian Branch finally missed a field goal. That's something that we can not get overzealous about. I do think by watching the recap of that game, I will say that Detroit, Dan Campbell went to guessing game way too early, going early in the 4th quarter with 12 minutes to go. They tried to do an onside kick, I don't know why he did that. I feel like a lot of people would tell you that, or a lot of analysts would tell you that he probably did that because he was afraid that Detroit couldn't stop Buffalo's defense. But I will say this. I think Dan Campbell needs to sometimes, again, understand that the game cannot be won or lost in the fourth quarter with 12 minutes to go. I really don't. I think that's kind of dumb. I don't know why no one's ever kind of told him that, but you can't lose the game with 12 minutes to go in the fourth quarter and you don't have faith in your defense because of Josh Allen and the rest of the core. I think when you put your team out there, you split your teams out there constantly to do that, they're going to fail eventually. And you have to trust your defensive players. Now, there's other ways and schemes of keeping Josh Allen in the pocket, but there's also other ways to understand that a field goal by the other team, like Buffalo Bills, is a lot better than a touchdown in the fourth quarter with 8 minutes to go. So what I'm saying though is this: if Detroit kicked the ball to Buffalo Bills with 12 minutes to go, and Buffalo Bills moved down the field and then they scored a field goal, that's a lot better than they ended up with a touchdown. So now, and you got to remember, Detroit came back twice. One from 14-0, and the other time was like 35-14, and we came back to make it 42-48, and we lost. But what I'm trying to say is this: I think Dan Campbell has to realize that your defense will pull it off somehow. The core of the team will put it together. Those guys will play for each other, even when the team is being depleted. Now, I know that McNeil went out. I know that Davis III went out. But to put your defense on the 5-yard line because of the recovery of the Buffalo Bills, got the onside kick and ran down the field to the 5-yard line is a bit obnoxious. And I'm telling you that I think that sometimes Dan Campbell needs to relax. Now, I know that Dan Campbell plays by like a Russian roulette thing, but this isn't Russian roulette. You're not. There's no reason. There's no reason. You still have a couple weeks left in the playoffs. You know that Green Bay Packers won earlier in the week, and you know that the Minnesota Vikings. Well, I should say this: it's ironic that the Green Bay Packers beat Seattle Seahawks in Seattle, and Seattle's not that bad, which makes me kind of wonder what the hell is going on. But I mean, you can't lose the game with 14 minutes left. You just can't. That was dumb. You set your team up to fail. Your fan base is erupted. And I think the guys who are probably giving you the most hard time for that loss are fans who are just obnoxiously love you. And I'm not really upset by this because this is a new territory that we've been doing. This is something that we've never got to 12-1. We never got into 12-1. So this is amazing. So I mean, maybe we should keep it. And maybe the upside with this is that if we are in the playoffs and we do get a bye week, other teams don't know what we're going to do. Because if we start playing conservatively, then teams may figure out our defensive scheme or our game scheme. And by the way that we've been recruiting players And by the way that we've been taking players from the practice squad, that pretty much tells you that Detroit's not in that worst situation. We still have an offense that can score at least 35 points a game. We have a defense that may give up maybe 24, 31 points a game, but if our offense can stay on the field, if we can protect Jared Goff, if Jared Goff can actually run out of the pocket and see the field in the big picture, that'd be great. The only times that Jared Goff becomes an issue with himself is when he assumes that a player is going to be on a spot and the play is already being broken up. That's the only times I see when Jared Goff throws a real bad interception, is that when a play is being broken up and he has to run out of the pocket and he's assuming that one of his targets are at a certain spot. But you already have the number 1 seed for Detroit. So Dan Campbell might be doing what he is going to keep doing to keep teams off base, to keep teams on hyper mode. And you know what? It may work out, it may not, but I'm gonna tell you too, I love this. I love the fact that we're going to make it to the back-to-back playoffs since 1953, 57. I don't know. But this is pretty, I'm all for it. I'm a little disappointed that we lost, but we did beat Buffalo Bills the last time Buffalo Bills was in town. So hypothetically, you would assume that the Buffalo Bills learned from their lesson. And what is the lesson from the Buffalo Bills? What is it? They didn't start slow against Detroit. They allowed Detroit to be slow because sometimes Detroit starts slow. So it was more on our behalf that we started slow. And if we started as quick as Buffalo Bills, that play, that onside kick may have never had to happen. So you can blame the defense, you can blame the offense, you can blame Dan Campbell, you can blame anybody. I mean, you can blame the defense coordinator, Aaron. I mean, you can blame anybody. But I think that Detroit is in a good spot. So I'm going to leave it like this. I was going to talk about the Detroit Pistons, but there's not a lot to say about Detroit besides Cade Cunningham's MVP year. I mean, if any player that should get MVP, it should be Cade Cunningham because he's on a team that isn't put together so well. And I'll get into it some other time. I'm going to watch the Detroit Pistons Miami Heat game. I think Detroit probably should be plus 1.5, minus 2.5, depending on what you think. But I think one thing that's going to determine Detroit's victory is going to be Ivy's points, Tobias Harris points, and if Durant plays. If Durant plays, it takes a lot of weight off a lot of the other guys on the team, like Isaiah Stewart, for rebounding, bad fouls. I do like Malik Beasley, Roslin, I think his name is, on Detroit, comes off the bench. He has a very nice, sweet three-point shot. As I'm talking about Detroit, I will say this. I think the issue with Ivy is that he needs to touch the ball almost as much as Cade Cunningham. But the only way to get Ivy the ball if he stops standing on the left wing or the right wing of the basketball court. He needs to keep moving around through picks. I think there needs to be like this supernova triangle between Tobias Harris and Ivy and Malik Beasley or whoever is on the court with them. If Cade Cunningham's the point guard or Ivy's the point guard, Cade needs to keep moving around picks. Durant needs to keep giving picks. Tobias needs to be giving picks to both of the players. So I think Tobias and Durant, they need to keep having picks for Ivy and Cade Cunningham. And by doing that, Cade will get his points, and so will Ivy. Ivy of all the players between Cade and himself, Ivy needs to be able to move without the ball, to get the ball, to have a shooting rotation where Cade Cunningham can make his own shot. He's more center balance on the court. I feel like Ivy has a great momentum when he's on top speed and he shoots a three-pointer or he's going into the lane. But when Ivy plays one-on-one and he has the ball in his hands for over 7 seconds and tries to drive into the paint, that's when he's going to get blocked. He needs to come off the picks, go towards the hole, and that's where he'll get his shot, a better shot. Same thing with a three-point shot or even 17, 15-footer. If Ivy is coming through the picks, you throw him the ball, he'll create a shot, he'll shoot a shot from that spot, and while that's being moved, while that's being operated, then Cade Cunningham needs to be moving without the ball. And if Ivy doesn't have his shot, Cade should be going towards the basket. If Ivy's going to try to make a 17-footer, he doesn't have a shot, Cade's coming through the hole, to the left wing, right wing, and that's how Ivy will get his assist. If that makes any sense to you, give me an applaud. If that doesn't make any sense to me, give me a sad face. Thank you for listening to my podcast. Thank you, RSS.com. Thank you, Spotify. Thank you, Apple Podcasts. Thank you, everyone from the east side of the state, Detroit. I love you guys. I'm not even from Detroit. I love Detroit. In some ways, I wish I lived in Detroit, but I think in some ways I'm happy I don't. Because if I live in Detroit, I don't think I'll be watching Detroit all the time. But I don't know. But thank you, everyone that's been listening. Thank you, everyone that's been watching. Peace, love, and happiness. And I may not do an episode on Thursday because I have to work Wednesday night and I don't know what's going on. So, but peace, love, and I'm out.